Hello and welcome to Equity Merchants on Business Front TV, the show where we track the capital flows driving growth across Africa's key sectors, from tech and finance to agriculture, infrastructure, health, energy, and beyond. I'm Chimgo's Dream, reporting from Lagos, Nigeria. African Development Bank approves over $600 million for South Africa, United Kingdom to invest $136 million in Kenya. Sustainable manufacturing company Miro secures additional funding, and Sahel Capital invests $1 million in avocado oil producer. The African Development Bank has approved over $600 million in funding to support critical infrastructure and green development in South Africa. In Johannesburg, a $139 million loan will upgrade electricity, water, sanitation and waste systems, directly benefiting more than 6 million residents. In a separate move, the bank has approved a $474.6 million loan to support South Africa's energy transition and transport reforms. The program promotes electric vehicle production, green hydrogen, and rail modernization while empowering women and youth through employment and skills training. The United Kingdom will invest $136 million in Kenya under the newly signed UK-Kenya Strategic Partnership. The funding targets over 500 startups and 5,000 digital SMEs, creating 30,000 new digital jobs. The two nations will deepen cooperation on artificial intelligence and advanced technologies, while the UK aims to mobilize 266 billion Kenyan shillings in broader investments and facilitate 32.3 billion Kenyan shillings in capital markets funding by 2030. On climate, the UK and Kenya pledged 35.5 billion Kenyan shillings in green financing to support clean energy and climate resilience. The partnership also enhances security cooperation, expands Kenya Airways flights to London, and promotes joint regional stability efforts through the EAC and SADC. Miro, a sustainable forestry and plywood manufacturing company operating in Sierra Leone and Ghana, has secured new funding to scale its operations. The investment round is led by Lagata, a forestry-focused investor specializing in sub-Saharan Africa, with additional support from existing backers including British International Investment, FMO, FinFund, Mirova, and a UK-based family office. The fresh capital will help Miro expand its vertically integrated model and strengthen its position as a global leader in sustainable plywood production. The funding comes amid industry-wide challenges, including global economic uncertainty and falling plywood prices. Sahel Capital has extended a $1 million loan facility to Payaza Oil, a leading avocado oil processor operating in Kenya and Tanzania. The funding through Sahel Social Enterprise Fund for Agriculture in Africa includes $500,000 in working capital and $500,000 for capital investments. Payaza Oil sources avocados directly from over 800 smallholder farmers, maintaining separate processing lines for organic and conventional produce. The company supports farmers with advance payments ahead of harvest and provides a stable offtake market. All of this avocado oil is exported primarily to Spain and Europe. Nigerian startups are increasingly exploring alternative funding strategies amid a challenging investment climate. Recently, fintech startup Payaza announced it had successfully redeemed its Series 1 commercial paper valued at approximately $10 million. In a conversation with CEO Ebenezer, he described the move as a deliberate step aimed at building credibility and trust within Nigeria's financial markets. Let's hear from Sheyi as he shares what this milestone means for Payaza and how it could influence broader funding trends within Nigeria's startup ecosystem. Let's start off with your reason for doing that. Startups would typically take out equity, or they'd probably just do regular debt, but you went the commercial paper route. So what was the need that you had that drove you to go the commercial paper route?
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for having us. And I think, as in starting up here as a couple of us, we have a particular vision that is driving us. And then one of the things that we are certain about is that, and then it's clear to us that the height of our vision is sustained by the level of the structure that we put in place. So which correlates to the fact that, in today's world, in technology, we talk about speed, we talk about AI, we talk about innovation. But when it comes to the world of finance, where you handle people's hard-earned money, then we talk about trust. So the major reason why we went into that place is that just to display our main focus which is we built a very strong structure, and then we're able to earn the trust side by side. So that was one of the reasons why we went to the market, and then to redefine the space and talk about another form of raising capital. So that's the essential reason why we went that route, and so far so good. It's been very, very interesting.
Yeah, it has been. So why did you go with commercial paper? I mean, there are a lot of other funding instruments you could have used. So why commercial papers?
Okay. So the major reason for commercial paper are two things. We bootstrapped when we started this company, and then we want to tell ourselves that okay, fine, an African institution can as well do something within that space. And then what do I mean by doing something extraordinary? Because most of the African companies, as in actually either go for equity, go for VC funding, but we just want to run a profitable enterprise first before we start looking at attracting capital. And then there are forms of getting all of this done. Either through equity or through debt. And then sincerely, one of the things I've done that I've observed over time, debt really, really foster discipline. So in my days in banking, I see if you started up a business with equity, there's tendency of becoming lazy, and then there's a tendency of not managing your cost very well. But I see most of the time that debt bring about discipline. That's one of the reasons why we went that route. Because you are holding people's fund, and then you have to repay, and you have to be efficient with all of people's fund.
Yeah, and I guess you must have had to be really disciplined in order to ensure that you repay and not default on your promise basically to your finances. But let's look at the process, right? This was the first time you were doing it. What was the process like for you? And you also perhaps the first fintech, at least that we know of, that is doing this. What was that process for you? How do you think your position maybe as a fintech influenced how financiers looked at you?
Okay, so I think the process wasn't that easy initially because from the get-go, we've had a 3-year plan, 4-year plan, and then 5-year strategy. So when we're starting up in 2021. So it's part of our 2 years or 3-year plan to be able to access a commercial paper, but you have to have that in your plan. So one of the processes is that essentially you have a very good structure. Number 2 is that your financial, so when we're starting up, we're audited by Deloitte. Thanks to Deloitte, put us through a lot of financial discipline and all of that. So your audit must be intact, your corporate governance, your operating environment. So you must have that at the back of your mind. It's not like a 3-week journey or 6-week journey or 90 days journey. So it's a journey that you'll apprehend. It must be part of your plan when you're starting. So which gives me the fact that I was explaining initially that the strength of your vision is built on your structure. Yeah. So you had your structure in mind that this is where I'm going to, at this time I should be at the market at this particular point in time. So what brought everything, the whole process is that you go through the rating process. So the rating process is where we have credit ratings in Nigeria, likes of Data Pro, GCR, Moody's, Augusto. So those are the 3 known credit rating agencies we have in Nigeria. So you submit all of your process to them. So part of the things that they request from you are your audited financials. They look at your operating environment. They look at your business profile. They look at your corporate governance. Then you're subjected to all of those tests. So either at the end of those tests, it takes you probably 1 or 2 months or 3 months, then they'll be able to issue you either you have an investment grade rating or non-investment grade rating. So it's an only investment grade rating that permits you to be able to access the capital market, so which is coordinated by FMDQ. And then, interestingly, you have to have work with different partners, as in kudos to our very, very first partner, which is Ava Capital, that put us all of through this, and then with our legal partner, with us TNP. So they both working hand to hand to just ensure they guide us all of this through this process. Yeah.
So this is the second time you're mentioning structure.
Yeah.
And I assume it's something that you took away from your days working both at KPMG and then at Access Bank. I mean, what lessons do you think is there for startups? Because startups typically are not very structured, and for the most part, we typically see startups try to glorify not having a structure, but you decided to have a structure from day one. Why do you think that's important for startups?
Startup, you definitely need structure, because if you are not accountable to anybody, you won't be able to grow as in the business as it is. Because one of the major things that structure does for you, it gives you accountability, and then the sense of having a direction and where to go to, because there are people that are going to ask you questions. There are things you have to do. And then structure does not just commemorate the fact that you have a board of, no, that doesn't mean. Structure starts from your self-discipline. And number two is that how you're going to manage your costs in sense of, okay, your financial, position. Because you are starting the business, let's say in the tech space, outside the tech space or the financial space, you are going to be handling people's fund. Yeah. So how effective are you managing the fund? Are you responsible in reporting it properly? So those are the things that the structure really, really demand. And then when you know that this is very, very important, that will instill discipline within that. So structure is very, very important. You have your board, you have your governance structure, you have your financial structure, you have your cost structure. So across all of those, and then my years in the corporate space really, really helped, because while managing several businesses, so I see the businesses that did well with, that have structure and have done extremely well. Businesses that do not have structure, so case in point, the percentage varies a whole lot, because the companies with structure, they were able to stand the test of time despite their issues, while the companies without structure, which is solely depending on one or two or three people's decision, then tends to have a lot of issues. So if you're going to be a startup, so structure is very, very important, and then structure brings about trust.
Yeah, very important, because that just leads me to my next question. So commercial papers are unsecured, and for a fintech that is playing in a space where there are still some doubts, right, from traditional investors about the viability of fintech investments, how did you go about sort of building credibility with investors?
At this point, I remember something that I would like to talk about, as in, when we were starting up this business, as in, kudos to somebody, his name is Deoye Ojuroye. I think is the ED of Providus Bank. That's the bank that really, really supported us starting up. And they are one of the banks that support fintechs very, very well. Took the bricks on us. We start processing with the bank, do most of our transactions there, and growing, and then we begin to show our our capacity, our transparency within the market. So once we started showing that transparency dovetailed into your audited financial. After we did transparency dovetail into your audited financial, it dovetailed into the way you report to your regulators. And then in the fintech space, you have about 3 regulators. Principally, you have the card scheme, and then you have the central bank across different. So the biggest central bank within the West Africa, Central Bank of us, as in CBN, and then Bank of Ghana. Those are the major 2 biggest within the West African space. So how do they build trust? This trust, the structure has been put in place under commercial, as in SEC, that Security and Exchange Commission. They've done that, put the structure in place that whosoever company that have this investment, there are other companies that are rated, that have, as in, non-investment grade. Okay. So in this non-investment grade start from B, as in downward. So you have some companies that have C. And then how did you get that investment grade? Investment grade are tested on your business environment, it's tested on your business profile, it's tested on your corporate governance, it's tested on your financials as well, and other conditions. It differs on different rating agencies. So, but the major thing is that structure will have been put in place while you are doing your business. So those are the reasons why, because they've tested your cash flow, they've looked at your liquidity, they've looked at it, then the rating agency will be able to say, okay, at this point, we are sure that this business is being run very well, efficiently, effectively, then they issue the rating. So while the rating has been issued, so if you have 2 investment grade rating, you can then approach the capital market, or you just have 1, you can approach the capital market. So initially in December, where we got an approval for about 50 billion to be able to be raised, as for us to be able to raise in the market. But we did the Series 1. So then, after which you have that approval, that's not the end of story. So you then have to go and pitch to various investors that have gotten this. This is what I'm going to do with this fund. This is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to return it as so date. So that is where the funding, the reason why you don't have any security, the structure has been put in place so that you don't need to provide any security. And if you are passed through that process, it's not, in the case of loan, you can package a loan just within 1 or 2 weeks or 3 weeks because it's collateralized. But in the case of commercial paper and the capital market structure is that it goes through a lot of process before you get, so you've gotten through rating, you've gotten through your financial audit, you've gotten through FMDQ. So everybody at one point or the other checked you, so before you get out to that point. So the level of structure that is involved in coming out for a commercial paper is very, very tough. That's why you see blue chip company are the one that most of the time that goes through the process. So what really helped us is that we've had this in mind since the inception of the company, that this is the route that we are going to go through. We talked to you about the structure that we've had in mind to put in place. So then we are working towards getting all of those things and then managing our books effectively so that when we get to that point, we'll be able to cross it.
Impressive.
Yeah.
So speaking of credit ratings, it's, if you, just like you've described, if you want to raise capital from the capital markets, your credit ratings, I mean, even if you're a government as well, if you want to raise capital, just how you're rated by credit agencies or credit rating agencies is very crucial.
Yeah.
And we are beginning to see conversations in Africa about the need for a homegrown credit agencies, credit rating agency now that sort of takes into cognizance our unique realities. How important do you think that is, and how much of a game changer could it be?
Yeah, it's very, very, I think we need it as Africa. You know, recently I was reading a report from, I think it's AFC, Samaila is talking about it, and then I look at, you know, in Africa they give us a prejudice rating. So what is about prejudice rating? In the sense that they look at the default rate in Africa. But if I'm to tell you that I think the report is available, Africa has one of the lowest default rates. Yeah, Africa has one of the lowest default rates. I think number one is Middle East, the UAEs and the Qatars. I think has 0.9, Africa followed by 1.9. It would be interesting to tell you that Western Europe has almost default rate of almost about 9.1%. Latin American default rate 9.1%, but all of those stories are not out there. The data are not there. So it's very, very good for us to rewrite our stories. And how do we rewrite our stories? Just for us to create our own internal credit. And then there are a few ones that are doing extremely well. Like, so Data Pro is over 30 years within the industry, but they just need to expand across African continent. Same as Augusto is being around over the years. Same as GCR. We just need more of it so that, and then get more recognized. And not just get more recognized, there should be a lot of investors that will be able to fund anyone that is rated by a local rating rather than depending on the likes of the foreign capital or foreign rating agency. Because still yet some investors, I would rather fund somebody with an international funding, international rated entity rather than a local rated entity. So we begin to practice all of those. So once we begin to build up an homegrown, and then most of us young ones, we can come together, because if you have a local rating agency, a lot of local rating agencies, I think in the West we have almost about 7, 8, 9, and then there are a lot of funds that back them up. So when we begin to fund all of these rating agencies as well, that anytime they issue out there, so it gives them more credibility, and then more people then begin to embrace it. Yeah.
Okay, so in your view, what do you think could be the biggest obstacles, right, to building a credit rating agency that powers much of Africa?
The major is the acceptability. You know, the thing about Africa is that we are about 54 countries, diverse. So you have to learn different rules, regulations, landscape of every country. So that's the biggest obstacle, is our diversity, which it should be our strength in the real sense. But that's one of the things, because if you check, even though within the fintech space, you have to engage CBN, you engage BOG, you engage CBK, so different rules across board. Recently, that Ghana, as in kudos to them, they were able to do passporting of license. Yeah. So we're able to do passporting of license across the region. So kudos to BOG that did that. So that should be obtainable. So if we're able to solve that issue around that space, that would be a very interesting one for us.
Okay. Would you encourage other startups to go the route that you've gone with the commercial papers?
Yeah. I would definitely. I want a lot of a lot of startups to just join this because it create a lot of financial discipline. Because when you know you are running on debt, then you have to be very, very detailed and then do what you're meant to do properly.
Okay. So yeah, just final question. What kind of changes would you like to see in Nigeria's capital markets, or especially around debt, that will make it more attractive for startups?
So if you say debt, what I believe is that before you go into debt, you must know what the fund is going to be utilized for. You just don't go raise money without knowing that, oh, this is the new thing in town. So there must be a purpose. So if you don't have a purpose, please just don't go into debt. And then the advice within the capital market, and I believe that the fundamental line is trust. And usually I used to tell, as in sometimes if I teach some students, I tell them, do you know the reason why a thief have a bank account? The only reason why a thief have a bank account is that he has stolen money and then he wants to keep it in a place that is safe. So if you can be a person of integrity and then a trustworthy person, capital will chase you. So there's a lot of capital, and then I think the DG of SEC, Dr. Agama, spoke extensively about it at the last UBA United Capital Stakeholders meeting. I was listening to him passionately. All the conversation should be around trust. So if they're able to trust you with about $15 million, then you're able to repay, then like that, capital begins to chase you. So it's a game of trust in a debt game. So once you begin to honor your obligation and you believe that these funds are necessarily not yours, then capital can chase in. So we just build an environment of more trust, more reliability, and then more financial transparency. Then it's a game changer for any startup.
Thank you so much, Sheyi. Every year, the African diaspora sends some tens of billions of dollars in remittances, often more than the total amount of foreign aid received by many countries. But beyond supporting family needs, what if those funds could do even more? Today, we're exploring how remittances can be harnessed not just for survival, but for sustainable strategic investment in local economies. Joe Ekemezie, CEO of Borderless, is our guest on the show, and he joins us to share how his startup is helping the African diaspora to invest back home. The African diaspora raised or sent back money, much more money than we got in aid last year, and it has sort of sparked these conversations around how we need to start thinking of how to harness some of that money for investments back home, especially in the light of receding aid, and even like for those of us in the startup space where there's lower funding or less funding. So what's your take on that? How important is this conversation? How important is it for us to start channeling funds from the diaspora back to economic value?
Yeah, so I think we need to start with looking at the actual number. Right? It's 100 billion that was sent to the continent in 2023, slightly higher in 2024. When you dig into the data, that number is split into two ways. So you have about 75% of that money that went towards what we call consumption remittance. So people need to eat, pay school fees, medical bills, etc. And then you have the remaining 25% that actually went towards investment. And these investments are things like somebody, investing in their, cousin's small business, somebody building a house, somebody investing in bonds in Nigeria, for example. So the thing is already happening. People are already investing home. The thing is, the data is not very clear. Somehow, people are not paying attention to the smaller detail. The first part, the 75 billion that went towards consumption, cannot be channeled towards investments. If that happens, people will go hungry. That's not good for anyone.
Okay.
However, we already see that there is 25%, which is 25 billion that already goes to the continent, which is great. Wow. But through our research and the work that we've been doing over the past 5 years cumulatively, is we noticed that the diaspora, the African diaspora in particular, has even more money. The number is 30 billion. And this 30 billion is not invested, it's not in the S&P 500, it's just sitting in the bank accounts. I'm going to use the term gathering dust. Can we funnel or help the diaspora funnel that money towards productive investments that's on the continent? And when this extra 30 billion start generating interest. For context, 10% of that's 3 billion, right? 20% 6, and then you can do the number. If we can help them invest that, then they can now use those returns to do more things. So what we're saying is, if you can make money from investing the money that you have sitting in the bank account, you don't have to go out of pocket to send money back home anymore. So if we can help channel that extra 30 billion, that capital becomes productive, that money goes to the continent, it goes to businesses that hire people, that create jobs, provide returns for people who are back, outside of the continent, and now you have that 30 billion actually growing. So I think, I want to provide a bit of context around the data, and sadly, it seems like when people leave Africa, it's like they've made it. Meaning that there hasn't been a lot of investment in terms of research in the diaspora, and that's the work that we've been doing over the past 5 years to understand the diaspora. Because I'm a diasporan, I am Togolese who lived in Europe for the past 20 years, and I've seen my mom go through her struggles and challenges, and also I have a lot of friends, peers, colleagues who are also diasporan, so I've been privileged to be a diasporan and work with so many diasporans to really, really understand us and figure out how we can contribute to the continent.
Yeah, so you make a good point there in the sense that the diaspora is already investing in Africa. So, it's something that a lot of people are probably you're conversant with or familiar with. A relative who has lived abroad for most of their life and they're building back at home, or they own a couple of businesses back at home. So you're right in saying that they are investing already. But we also have a scenario where some of them have invested, and this is very common in Nigeria. I don't know if it's common in Togo, but you have people who they've been funneling money back home for a building project, for example, and then after 5-6 years or something, you come back home and you try to check on that project and realize that nothing was happening. So the person who you were sending the money to for this purpose just used the money for whatever it was that they chose. And a lot have been burned, and they've sort of decided not to invest except they are directly supervising those investments. How do we help people like this who have been burned and who have probably decided it's just not worth it except I'm on ground? How do we help people like this to make more investments? What kind of structures do we need to build in order to have them build or make investments back home?
So many of us, the African diaspora, want to go back home. And I keep saying this. We're just not ready yet. That's why you see a lot of people wanting to invest back. And the sad part is we don't have the time to go back on the ground and supervise. If you want to supervise a building project that's going to take you 9 to 12 months, that means that you're leaving everything that you're doing back in Europe or in America. And you can't really do it because it's like a double-edged sword. If you go to that side, then you can't earn money to keep building. And so many people have been burnt. It's a story. My mom has gone through it. My family has gone through it. I've spoken to so many strangers. The one that really broke my heart recently is a gentleman who lived in Germany for years, and he sent 200,000 euro back, and the house wasn't built. You and I know what you can do with 200,000 euros. That's a lot of money. That's nearly $220,000, and the FX today, that's nearly 300 million naira. It's crazy amount of money. What we're seeing is there are a lot of companies that are actually helping people get projects from start to completion on the ground. This week, I speak to so many great entrepreneurs in Africa, but also outside, who are helping people complete projects back home. The one that I spoke to this week too, actually, a company called Bankole, and it's a gentleman who now lives between Nigeria and Canada. And what he's doing is build this tech that allows people who are building back to essentially supervise the project from start to finish. It's excellent. I am so excited to do work with them because they are solving problems for us, because we help people pull money together and invest in projects. And many times I'm dialing in from London. Yes, I spend time in Africa, I spend time on the continent, but I can't spend all my time supervising projects or doing so many things. So there are companies like that can help you, especially when it comes to real estate. The second company that I spoke to this week, it's founded by a guy called Joe Orji, and it's called Trust Crow. So TrustCro allows you to essentially find pre-vetted real estate to buy, pre-vetted land to buy, and they are signing an agreement with the authorities to essentially enable the diaspora to find these pre-vetted properties, assets before they can invest. So these are like two great companies, and there are two of many companies that are already building solutions to really help rebuild the trust that has been broken over the past couple of years. What we are doing, at least at Borderless, is we're helping people put collectives together, pull money, and acquire assets. And the ones that we've done so far is real estate. Before we buy any assets, we do a ton of DD. What that means is, first, you're not putting a lot of capital at play, especially if you haven't invested in real estate in Africa before. But also, you are buying something that's pre-vetted. We've seen it, we send people over, and you start earning rental income. It's not a property that you own by yourself, but you own it with a group of people. What that helps you do is start earning money on your money immediately, but also you get to learn about real estate in Africa. The challenge is a lot of people don't really understand how real estate works in Africa. Africa is big, 54 countries, so many languages, so many cities, and a lot of people, especially those who are not African, want to go there, or they're like, their parents are African, or they're African American, or whatever the case is. They want to go in there and jump it without really studying the landscape. That never really goes so well. So what we're enabling people to do is get a first taste of the market, and if you're putting in 5 or 10,000, that's better than putting in 200,000. So when you learn the landscape, you've gone a couple of times, then you build those relationships with the likes of TrustCro, Bankole, and now from Washington DC or LA or San Francisco, you cannot build the house of your dreams, and when the time is right, you can go back home.
Awesome. All right. So let's look at something really important that you raised, which is the fact that Africans do want to move, or Africans in the diaspora want to move back home. But so I don't know if you saw this video that was making the rounds on Twitter. I think that was last week. And it was just a lady talking about how her parents had invested a whole lot of money in their hometown, and they didn't invest that much money in their kids. So it was sort of a knock on the older generation who did that. And there's this worry, especially with sort of instability in some African governments, that we could lose a generation of Africans who they'd move and then cut ties with home. How much of a problem is that? I mean, you're a diasporan. You've lived outside the continent for most of your life now. So how much of a problem do you think that is? And is that something we should be worried about?
No, it's not something we should be worried about. Africa actually has the fastest growing population. So the more people that leave, that means that more jobs are created, first thing first. And when people don't come back,
okay,
there are a lot of people doing things on the ground. We need them. They have the resources, they have the knowledge. We need them to come back. And what I've seen maybe over the past 2-3 years is when Tinubu came into power in Nigeria, he actually managed to hire a lot of people who left. So Bosun, that we all know very well, wasn't living in Nigeria. Well, he was, but he spent a lot of time in Europe. He's now back. You have a lady called Jane who also went back. I saw an interview recently by a lady who is now head of the Nigerian Postal Service. She has a very American accent. That means that she's also coming back. So what we're seeing is people that we actually grew up with, people that we know outside are the future leaders. So there's change coming. And if you want a Nigeria or Togo that you want to live in, we have to go back. Policies are not made by, AI. Policies are made by people. So if you want to see real change, yes, you can cut ties all you want, but change can happen within a generation. And many of us have to play part in that change. We can't just sit back and be like, somebody's going to solve the problem for us. So if we want to see change, if we're complaining about things are not working, the government is not doing the right thing. Governments are people. And a lot of people that have gone abroad are going back to actually make real change. And I was in Paris recently, and I spent time with the guys from Itana, And when you look at the Itana is the company that allows people to go back and set up companies, etc. It's a digital free trade zone. As part of that delegation, there's so many people that I know I've worked with that have gone back now to do work. We might not see immediately, and that's how change works. Like, change doesn't happen drastically, but it's over time that you see it. And it's people that we know, people that we went to school with outside that are going back. So if you don't want to go back, it's completely fine. But if you want to see an Africa that resembles something that you're used to, a place that you want to live, maybe it's time to start thinking about that.
Yeah, really important there. So we are pretty familiar with real estate investments. We are pretty familiar with technology investments from the diaspora. But beyond these two areas, what other areas are you seeing the African diaspora invest in? I think there's also agriculture to a lesser extent. But beyond these three areas, what other areas are you seeing the diaspora invest in?
I think when people are thinking about investing in Africa, they need to learn the behavior of Africans.
Okay.
The average African spends 90% of their wallet, or how much money they have, on four things: housing, food, agriculture, energy, and logistics. Those are the four things that money is going into. So if you look at the sectors that are close to these four things, then maybe that's where you should be investing. For example, I'm seeing a lot of money market funds. I'm seeing a lot of bonds that are being issued by the likes of Dangote and by a lot of companies in Nigeria. And I think people need to pay attention to this. We also have stock markets across the continent. And I heard a stat yesterday, I haven't verified it, but the Ghanaian stock market overperformed the American one 2x last year. I haven't double checked it. But all this money is now going into infrastructure that will enable logistics to move better. That means that food is moving better. That means we can build more houses. I think more and more people should be investing in African bonds and African stocks. Before you do that, you need to really understand what happens. So when you invest in bonds issued by a country, what happens is the country takes that money, invests it into projects to make the place better, and pay you returns. That money becomes productive. And now you're assuming that the government is using the money the right way that it's supposed to use it, right? And when you have the right people with the right ethics, the money will be spent well. When you invest in your country's GDP grows. That means that the place gets better. That means people's lives are better. That means better roads. That means better hospitals. And the country gets better. And you also make money. And the returns are actually better than what you'd get right now, at least in the US. I think the T-bills are 5.5%. When you look at the T-bills in Nigeria, it's hovering around 20%. Yes, inflation and FX volatility, but the Naira hasn't actually moved much this year. I think it's hovered between 1,500 and 1,600, and we're already halfway throughout the year. So when you look at the data, really and truly, investing in Africa can be profitable, but a lot of people don't have access to that data. They don't know how to invest in bonds, and there's actually a lot of companies that are doing this, like the likes of Bamboo, the likes of Get Equity. I'm talking specifically about Nigeria here. And I spoke to a company yesterday called MyStocks.Africa, and they are enabling anybody to buy African stocks throughout 5 major regions. We need to have access to more information so that we can make informed decisions. And you need to start using the right tools, the technology where you can invest. Now, investment into Africa can be expensive, but when you're using the right fintechs and the right platforms, you can invest at a much lower cost. But more importantly, get your money back. And I think that's what we really want to achieve at Borderless. We want to enable people to invest, and whatever we promise we're going to deliver, we'll deliver. And if we deliver to give you 5% at the end of the year, January 2026, we should be able to give you 5%. What happens is, because we were true to our words, you're like, oh, I know, I like these guys, I've used them before, I'll use them again. What we've seen at Borderless so far with the collectives that we work with, when people are getting returns, they're just reinvesting. But if they're not getting returns, what happens is they just want to pull the money out because they don't trust you. And that's where that's where the rebuilding of the trust starts. And when people are reinvesting, again, money's going back to the continent and there's productivity. We need to increase how much capital goes to Africa. and we need to invest, we need to diversify. There's so many opportunities, and what we want to do at Borderless is put these opportunities in front of anyone, anywhere. We're starting with the African diaspora because we understand the diaspora, they understand us. But when people start seeing returns and talk about it, now Africa will become very investable, not just for Africans, but anywhere, because, or anyone. Everybody wants returns. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. Like, money goes where returns are. And then we'll see everyone coming to invest in Africa. And that's the end goal. So many opportunities, infrastructure. I've been seeing private credit deals. Private credit is crazy. Private credit works in Africa because the interest rates are so high. And if you know what you're doing, like I think interest rates in Nigeria are in the mid-20s, and interest rates in the West, like I think the ECB, the European Central Bank, just dropped the interest rates. Again, I think it's like 2 or 3%. So if you can actually have access to capital at 2 or 3% and lend it in the mid-20s, now you have this huge margin that you're working with. So private credit is becoming more and more popular on the continent. I haven't done anything in the space, but I'm seeing opportunities. And what we want to do is we want to bring these opportunities to the diaspora through Borderless so that they can invest in things that can generate them returns.
Okay. Yep. So we've talked a lot about what the private sector can do. And I think we can just wrap up with what policies are necessary to encourage more diaspora investing. So I was reading up earlier, Nigeria first tried a diaspora bond in 2017, and that raised over 300 million. And last year it did the same thing, and I think that was about $2 billion. So what kind of policies should African governments, African policymakers be looking at to encourage more and more investments from the diaspora?
So we need a lot of good policies, policies that enable folks to have access to these opportunities regardless of where they are. We need to also lower the barrier to entry for the average person. Now that's the work that we're doing at Borderless, but I think these are policies that can enable anyone anywhere to invest in Africa. So those two policies, we also need to figure out how to keep our FX stable. When there's stability, people can plan. But when the FX is moving up and down, then you struggle to invest because you don't know what's going to happen overnight. Now, I feel like Nigeria has actually gone through like the hardest part in 2023 and 2024 when the Naira went from, 400 to like 1,600. I think it's gone to like 17, 18 and then came back. Stability breeds growth. So we need to put in, our governments need to put in policies that will make sure that just keep the FX stable. Some countries are doing it, I won't mention them, but again, there could be some manipulation there. So let's keep the currency stable without manipulating too much. You need it to flow. When you look at USD GBP or USD Euro, while it fluctuates within a range, and when it goes past a certain range, there is people start crying. When you have that stability, then people can do business. People know that, hey, if I send my goods from China to Nigeria and that takes 90 days, the price I paid there won't change too much. And that's where stability really, really breeds growth. So we need to put in very good policies that can really, really help us or help our economy stay stable. And yeah, more and more people will invest. If I was to do one thing, it's just keep the FX stable. Keep it, if we can. And I know that the Nigerian Central Bank is doing a lot of work. I'm sure you've seen, again, the Naira has been fairly stable. We need to keep that going for a very long time. And if it stays at 1,600, then so be it. Keep it, leave it there. So be it. We can do a lot more business when there's stability, and I think that a lot of African governments need to pay attention to that.
Awesome, thank you. Stability is super important. Thank you so much. That's all we have for you on this edition of the show. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe to Business Front TV for full episodes and catch our clip highlights on LinkedIn and X. I'm Chimgozrim. Thanks for watching and see you next week.